Sister Maria knelt beside her mother's old cedar chest, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, filtering through the bedroom window. Carmen had passed 3 months ago, and Maria had finally found the strength to sort through her belongings. The chest creaked as she lifted the heavy lid, revealing layers of memories wrapped in tissue paper and mothballs. Her mother's life lay before her in careful arrangements: baptism certificates, report cards, wedding photos with Jorge, her stepfather. Each item told a story Maria thought she knew completely. Carmen had been devout, quiet, devoted to her family and church. She had raised Maria alone for the first 2 years of her life, claiming Maria's biological father had abandoned them before her birth. At the bottom, beneath her mother's wedding dress, Maria's fingers found something unexpected: a small wooden box, no larger than a jewelry case. The wood was worn smooth by countless hands, darkened with age, and a tiny brass lock held it closed. Maria had never seen it before in all her 42 years. Her heart quickened as she examined it, searching for answers in its simple construction. There, taped to the bottom with yellowed adhesive, was a small brass key wrapped in aged tissue paper. The tape peeled away easily, as if it had been replaced many times over the years. Maria held the key up to the light, noting how it seemed to tremble in her fingers, or perhaps that was her hand shaking. She paused before inserting the key, sensing that this moment would divide her life into before and after. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bedroom floor, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. Carmen's bedroom felt sacred and expectant, as if it had been waiting 42 years for this discovery. The lock clicked open with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside, yellowed envelopes were stacked neatly, each one bearing the same careful masculine handwriting. Maria's breath caught as she read the address written in fading blue ink: "My dearest Carmen." The return address made her stomach drop like a stone: Father Miguel Santos, St. Catherine's Parish. This was the church where her mother had worshipped for decades, where Maria herself had been baptized, confirmed, and had taken her first communion. Father Miguel had been a constant presence in their lives, the gentle priest who had blessed her when she took her vows, who had given her mother's last rites just 3 months ago. With trembling fingers, she lifted the first letter, dated 43 years ago, 1 year before her own birth. The envelope was addressed in Miguel's distinctive script, postmarked from the parish. Maria's hands shook as she carefully unfolded the yellowed paper, the creases soft with age and repeated handling. "My beloved Carmen," the letter began, "I count the hours until I can see your face again in the garden tomorrow evening. Your smile haunts my dreams and gives me strength through my darkest moments of doubt. When you looked at me during Mass this morning, I nearly forgot the words of consecration. How can I serve God when my heart belongs entirely to you?" The words seemed to burn on the page. This was not the voice of a priest counseling a troubled parishioner. This was not spiritual guidance or pastoral care. This was the voice of a man desperately, completely in love. Maria's world tilted on its axis as she realized she was holding evidence of a forbidden romance that challenged everything she thought she knew about her mother, her faith, and her family. Block 3. The Revelation Unfolds. 295 words. Letter after letter revealed a passionate correspondence that had spanned nearly 2 decades. Father Miguel wrote of stolen moments in the church garden after evening prayers, of his struggle between sacred vows and earthly love, of dreams of a different life where he could claim Carmen openly. His handwriting grew more desperate with each letter, the careful priestly script dissolving into urgent emotional scrawl. Carmen's responses were there too, carbon copies kept in her meticulous handwriting, revealing a woman equally consumed by an impossible love. She wrote of sleepless nights, of the agony of sitting in his congregation while pretending to be just another parishioner, of loving a man she could never fully have. The other women speak of their husbands' faults at the market, Carmen had written. I smile and nod, but how can I complain about a man who exists only in shadows and stolen moments? How can I explain that my heart belongs to someone who can never be mine? Then Maria found the letter that changed everything. I felt our child move today, Carmen had written in her careful script. She kicks strongly, just like her father's stubborn spirit when he argues theology with the bishop. Miguel, my love, I am carrying your baby, and I am terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. Father Miguel's response spoke of joy mixed with anguish. How I long to hold you both, to claim what is mine by right of love, if not by law. Yet I am bound by vows that feel like chains around my soul. What have we done, my darling? What beautiful, impossible thing have we created? Maria's hands shook as she read her own conception reduced to ink on paper, her existence born from a love that defied the very foundations of the faith that had shaped her entire life. Block 4, The Weight of Truth, 302 words. The bedroom seemed to spin around Maria as the reality crashed over her like a wave. Father Miguel, the gentle priest who had performed her first communion, who had blessed her when she took her vows 20 years ago, who had held her mother's hand as she died, was her biological father. The man she had called father in faith was her father in blood, a truth hidden behind decades of Sunday masses and hushed confessions in the wooden booth where she had poured out her sins to her own parent. She found a photograph tucked between two letters, the edges soft with handling. Her mother as a young woman, perhaps 25, radiant and laughing, standing beside a handsome man in civilian clothes. The resemblance was unmistakable and devastating. Maria had inherited his dark eyes, his strong jawline, the same elegant hands that had blessed countless congregations and elevated the Eucharist every Sunday of her life. Miguel, my love, was written on the back in her mother's young handwriting, our secret weekend in Santa Barbara, June 1982. The date was 8 months before Maria's birth. She stared at the photograph until her vision blurred with tears. Here was proof of a happiness she had never seen in her mother's daily life. Carmen's face glowed with a joy that Maria realized had disappeared after her birth, replaced by the quiet resignation that had characterized her mother's demeanor for as long as she could remember. How many times had she knelt before Father Miguel for blessing, never knowing she was seeking approval from the man whose DNA she carried? How many times had her mother sat in those wooden pews, watching the father of her child perform sacred rituals while pretending he was nothing more than their spiritual shepherd? The weight of the deception felt crushing. Block 5, Mother's Sacrifice, 299 words. As Maria continued reading, the full scope of her mother's sacrifice became devastatingly clear. Carmen had been offered a chance to leave town with Miguel, to start fresh in another state where no one knew them. Several letters detailed their plans. Miguel would leave the priesthood, Carmen would divorce Jorge, whom she had married as a cover, and they would finally live as a family. But Carmen had ultimately refused. I cannot let our love destroy 3 lives, she had written in what appeared to be her final letter to Miguel. Maria deserves better than to be known as the priest's bastard child. She deserves to grow up without whispers following her to school, without shame attached to her very existence. You deserve to continue God's work without this shadow over your ministry. I will carry this secret to my grave, my darling, but know that every day she smiles, you live on in her. The letter was dated just weeks after Maria's birth, written in the shaky handwriting of a woman recovering from childbirth and heartbreak. Carmen had chosen to protect both her daughter's future and her lover's calling, sacrificing her own happiness for what she believed was the greater good. Maria found evidence of her mother's careful planning. Carmen had created an elaborate fiction about Maria's father, a traveling salesman who had promised marriage but disappeared when she became pregnant. She had endured the judgment of the community, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, the pitying looks from other mothers, all to protect a truth that would have destroyed the man she loved and the faith community that sustained them both. The magnitude of her mother's love and sacrifice left Maria breathless. Carmen had lived a lie for 42 years, taking the truth to her grave as promised. Block 6. The Priest's Torment. 296 words. Father Miguel's letters revealed a man slowly dying from the weight of his secret. His correspondence chronicled decades of torment, watching his daughter grow from afar while being unable to claim her as his own. "I watch her during Mass," he had written when Maria was 7 years old. "She has your spirit, your intelligence, your way of tilting her head when she's thinking. When she looks at me with those dark eyes, my heart breaks anew. I am living a lie, Carmen, but I cannot find the courage to speak the truth." The letters continued even after Carmen married Jorge, 2 years after Maria's birth. Miguel's correspondence grew more tortured, filled with jealousy and self-recrimination. "I should be happy that you found security with Jorge, that Maria has a father figure who can give her what I cannot. But I am selfish enough to wish it were me walking her to school, me teaching her to ride a bicycle, me tucking her into bed with bedtime stories." His struggles with faith intensified over the years. "How can I preach about honesty when my life is built on deception? How can I counsel others about God's love when I have broken my most sacred vows? Yet when I see Maria's face during communion, when I place the host on her tongue, I feel God's presence more strongly than ever. Perhaps He works through our failures as much as our faithfulness." The raw honesty of his pain leaped from every page. Miguel wrote of sleepless nights, of drinking too much wine after evening prayers, of the constant ache of loving two people he could never openly claim. His handwriting grew shakier with age, but his love for Carmen and Maria never wavered, burning through every carefully composed sentence. Block 7. A Daughter's Calling. 303 words. One letter made Maria gasp aloud, her hand flying to her throat. Written when she was 18 and had announced her intention to join the convent, Miguel's words were prophetic and devastating. Perhaps this is God's way of claiming what was always His. She has found her path to serve Him, and maybe through her complete devotion, our sins can find redemption. I pray that her faith will be stronger than mine, that she will find the peace that has eluded us both for so many years. Carmen's response was brief but equally shattering. She is becoming everything we could never be, pure, devoted, untainted by our failures. Let her light shine where ours was dimmed by forbidden love. Perhaps God will accept her service as payment for our transgressions. Maria realized with growing horror that her mother's fervent support of her religious calling hadn't been just maternal pride. It had been desperate hope for absolution. Carmen had pushed her toward the convent, had celebrated every step of her spiritual journey, believing that Maria's devotion to God might somehow balance the scales of their sin. "She blessed me today before I left for the novitiate," Miguel had written. "Placed her hands on my head and prayed for my ministry. Her touch burned like fire, Carmen. Our daughter blessed me, not knowing she was blessing the man who gave her life, the man whose very existence contradicts everything she believes about purity and devotion." The correspondence revealed how both her parents had lived vicariously through her spiritual achievements. Every honor, every advancement in her religious life had been reported between them like shared victories. They had sacrificed their love so completely that they experienced joy only through their daughter's service to the God they felt they had betrayed. Maria's calling had become their redemption, her purity their absolution. Block 8. The Final Years. 298 words. The letters grew less frequent as the years passed, but they never stopped entirely. Even as Miguel aged and Carmen battled the illness that would eventually claim her, they continued to write, their passion evolving into a deep, abiding love, mixed with profound regret. The handwriting became shakier, the paper occasionally spotted with what Maria realized were tears. "We are old now, my darling," Miguel had written just 2 years ago. "Our bodies are failing, our time growing short, but my love for you remains as strong as the day I first held your hand in the rose garden behind the rectory. I dream sometimes that in heaven there will be no vows to break, no congregation to scandalize, no daughter to protect. In heaven, perhaps we can finally be together." Carmen's responses grew philosophical and melancholy. "I watch Maria serving her community, see the peace in her face when she prays, and I know we made the right choice. Our sacrifice bore fruit in her devotion. She will never know the agony of choosing between love and duty because we chose for her." Carmen's final letter to Miguel was found unsealed in the box, written in a shaking hand just weeks before her death. "Miguel, I am dying, and soon our secret will die with me. Maria must never know. It would destroy her faith, her peace, everything she's built her life upon. Promise me this burden dies with us both. Let her continue believing in the purity of her calling, the righteousness of her path. Our love was real, but it must remain buried with our bones." There was no response from Miguel in the box. Perhaps there had been no time for him to write back, or perhaps he had kept his final words to Carmen, separate from this hidden archive of their impossible love. Block 9. Present Dilemma. 301 words. Maria sat in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the evidence of a love story that had shaped her entire existence without her knowledge. Outside, the evening bells of St. Catherine's were calling the faithful to Vespers, the same bells that had marked the hours of her parents' secret meetings, the same bells that had witnessed their stolen moments and hidden anguish. Her faith, her calling, her very identity, all of it built on a foundation of secrets and sacrifice that she had never suspected. She thought of every interaction with Father Miguel over the decades, searching for signs she had missed. Had there been moments when his eyes lingered on her face too long? Had his blessing carried extra weight, extra tenderness? Had her mother's insistence on their regular confessions with Miguel been about more than spiritual guidance? The weight of the revelation pressed down on her like a physical force. Should she confront Miguel? Should she pretend she'd never found the box? Should she tell the bishop? The questions swirled in her mind like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. For 42 years, 3 people had carried this secret. Now only 2 remained, and one of them had just learned the truth that the other 2 had died to protect. She carefully placed the letters back in their wooden sanctuary, her hands moving with the same reverence she showed the communion vessels. These pages contained a love story as real and sacred as any biblical account, yet they also contained the evidence of broken vows that could destroy reputations, shatter faith, and undermine everything she had built her life upon. The photograph of her parents' happiness seemed to glow in the dim light, a testament to a love that had been real, powerful, and ultimately sacrificial. But was truth always worth the destruction it might bring? Block 10. The Garden Encounter. 297 words. The next morning, Maria found herself walking through the church garden where, according to the letters, her parents had first kissed among the roses 43 years ago. She hadn't intended to come here, but her feet had carried her to this sacred ground of forbidden love, drawn by an invisible thread connecting her to their story. The roses were still there, older now, their blooms smaller but still fragrant in the morning air. She knelt beside the bush that Miguel had mentioned most frequently in his letters, the white roses that Carmen had loved, that had witnessed their first embrace under a full moon in June of 1981. Sister Maria? The familiar voice made her heart stop. She turned slowly to find Father Miguel approaching along the garden path, his 80-year-old frame bent but still dignified. His morning routine had always included a walk through these gardens, she remembered. Had he been coming here all these years to remember? "You're here early this morning," he said gently, settling onto the wooden bench beside the roses with a soft grunt of effort. "You look troubled, my child. Is there something weighing on your heart?" The kindness in his eyes, her eyes, she now knew, nearly broke her resolve. This man who had shaped her spiritual life, who had been a father to her in every way but name, looked at her with such genuine concern that the truth almost spilled from her lips like water from a broken dam. But as she studied his weathered face, she saw something else, a careful watchfulness, a subtle tension around his eyes that suggested he might already suspect why she was here. Had he noticed the disturbance in Carmen's room during the funeral preparations? Did he know about the box? "Father," she began carefully, testing the waters of this dangerous conversation. "Block 11. The choice," 299 words. "Father," Maria began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I've been thinking about my mother lately, about the secrets we carry, and whether some truths are too heavy for one person to bear alone." She watched his face carefully, noting the slight tremor that ran through his hands, the way his breath caught almost imperceptibly, the manner in which his eyes searched hers with a mixture of hope and terror. He knew. Somehow he had always known this day might come. Father Miguel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the white roses where it had all begun so many decades ago. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 42 years of carefully guarded words. "Your mother was a remarkable woman, Maria. She taught me much about sacrifice, about love that asks for nothing in return, about the courage it takes to carry a burden in silence." He paused, and when he looked back at her, there were tears gathering in his eyes, the same dark eyes she saw in her mirror each morning. Some secrets are kept not out of shame, but out of love. Perhaps that's enough. The understanding that passed between them was deeper than words, sacred as any communion they had shared across the altar. Maria felt the weight of choice settle on her shoulders. She could shatter the peace her mother had died to protect, or she could honor the sacrifice that had shaped all their lives. She reached into her pocket and felt the small brass key, warm from her touch. Then she stood, brushing the garden soil from her habit. "Yes, Father," she said softly. Perhaps love is always enough. The box would remain closed, the letters unspoken, but the love that created them would live on in the faith they both served, in the garden where it all began, in the daughter who chose mercy over truth.